we were discussing about the introduction of the Power BI, Power Query, Power View, Power Maps, and Power Pivot, and what are the different kind of services components available inside the Power BI, like Power BI Desktop, Power BI Online Service Cloud, Power BI Report Server, and Power BI Mobile App, and the life cycle of the Power BI project. So today, what I'm going to focus on the inside the Power BI Desktop. When you are connecting to your data source, there are two different kind of connectivity modes, three different kind of connectivity modes available. So the three different kind of connectivity modes are import mode, direct query mode, import mode, direct query mode, and live connection. So what is the difference between these three connections? When we can choose import mode, when we can choose direct query and live connection. This is very important interview question. Okay, so as a part of your architecture for your Power BI, you need to establish a connection from your data source to here. While you are connected to the data source, you have to select what is the connectivity mode you want to use. So what is the advantage of this connectivity mode? So for example, this is my data source. Data source is SQL Server. And this is my Power BI desktop. This is my Power BI desktop. I am going to connect to SQL Server from Power BI desktop. SQL Server. And this is Power BI desktop. So if you want to connect to the server, you need to provide the information. What is your server name, DB name, username, password. So all these four details you need to provide over here. Once you are providing these details, for example, in my source table, I have a data like this: employee number, employee name, and employee number is 100, 200, and 300, and Ram, Vihan, Sham. So this is how we have the data over here, 3 rows. So once you are connecting to this SQL server, then your Power BI is trying to, when I'm using the connectivity mode out of 3 modes, I will use the import mode. What do you mean by import mode? Import mode is simply copying the data from data source to SQL server. Copying the data from data source to SQL server. So the data source is SQL server. So what will happen if you are using the connectivity mode as import connectivity mode? So just now I am connecting from my Power BI desktop to SQL server. What is the time now? 6:44 p.m. Then at 6:44 p.m. whatever the data you have in your source systems, all the data will come and copying into your Power BI. Employee number, employee name, 100, 200, Vihan, 300, Sham. So all the 3 records are copied. 6:44. Immediately at 7:30, there is one new record added, Rohini. Okay. Immediately at 7:30 p.m. there is a new record added. So is that record is available immediately in your Power BI desktop? No. until again you are re-importing the data. The source data, whatever the changes applied, will not be reflected immediately in your Power BI desktop. Got it? So import mode is just copying the data from your data source system and storing into your Power BI. And then we are going to design the visualizations by taking the data from your model. A import connectivity mode, just copying the data from your data source SQL Server to Power BI desktop or model. You can say simply it is a model. But one disadvantage here is, so for example, every day evening 6:44 p.m. only I will importing the data as per my scheduling of the data. So until tomorrow 6:44 p.m. you need to wait to get reflect this new record whatever added over here to be displayed in your report. So import is taking a copy of the data from your source to Power BI model. At the time when you are importing the data, whatever you have, completely it will copy and store into Power BI desktop. So the advantage of this mode is, the import mode advantages is, the data is storing in your already inside the model. In your model already data is available. So your visualizations, no need to go to your data source to bring the data. The data is available already inside Power BI. Immediately the data will be coming to your visualizations. Immediately the data will come into visualizations. That is called, so the performance is better the performance. Better the performance because better the performance because of data is already copied into Power BI model. Okay, so who joined? Someone wrong. Okay, so that is the one advantage. The second advantage, if you are using this import connectivity mode, this mode will support to connect all data sources. For example, if you want to connect to, there are many number of data sources available in your Power BI desktop. Most of the data sources are supporting for the import connectivity mode. And one more advantage is, when you are using this import connectivity mode, all the features in Power BI desktop are enabled and can use for development. So when you are using this import connectivity mode, there are many development features available inside the Power BI desktop. You can use those features to develop. You can use those features to develop the reports. Okay. And the next one is, so these are the primary advantages. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantage is, the data whatever it is displaying in your report, it's not a live data. Here you have one more record, but your report is not displaying. So the live data will not be available over here. The live data is not available. The data inside the report may not be updated data. May not be updated data. you need to wait until next read import of the, or until next schedule of the data refresh. That is the one disadvantage. What is the other disadvantage you are finding? So for example, in your source, if we have a huge volume of the data, like 100 GB of the data, here to copy the 100 GB of the data, how much time it will take? Okay, you are copying 100 GB of the data. So to store the 100 GB of the data into your Power BI, it needs a lot of memory. So needs a lot of memory and resources to store and process the data. Understand? Data inside the report may not be updated, and you need to maintain a lot of memory and resources and CPU to process this data into the to process this data. That is another disadvantage. So majorly these are the two disadvantages and these are the three advantages. So now coming to the direct query. So direct query mode, for example, this is my data source SQL Server. This is my Power BI desktop. This is my Power BI desktop. Server name, DB name, password, and username, password. Okay. So what we are trying to do, whatever the data you have, employee number, employee name, 100 Ram, 200 Sham, 200 Vihan, 300 Sham. So this data we are trying to load into my Power BI. So when you are loading this data into Power BI, what it will be loading? So it will not load any data. What it will load? It will just load the metadata. What do you mean by metadata? Metadata means column names, data types, that's all. Because we are using the connectivity mode as a direct query. Means always your visualizations are querying the data every time from your data source. So how this process will happen? Your visual will contact your model. Your model immediately will go to your data source and bringing the data whatever you have. So there is no storage system by copying whole data from your source to Power BI. Whatever the data is required to display inside this visualization, only that data through your model from your data source will be querying and displaying inside the visualization. That is called direct query mode. So whenever your data got changed in your source system, immediately the data will be reflected in your data source in Power BI, because always your Power BI desktop is in a sync with your data source. It's a live connection, it's a direct connection. Always whatever the data you have, any data changes immediately, that data will be querying from your Power BI desktop. Are you able to understand? Okay. All right. So the next thing is, what are the advantages of this Power BI direct query mode, the advantage is whatever the disadvantages in the import mode, those are advantages over here. Whatever the disadvantages of the import mode is advantages of this one. We will see how it is. So that is simply go over here. So direct query mode, what are the advantages? Advantages are, what are the disadvantages over here? Just that is the advantages over here. Data inside report may not be updated, but here it's always live data will be available. And then you need to wait until next schedule. No need to wait for any schedule, because the data will come immediately. And what is the next? Needs a lot of memory and resources to store and process the data. Do we need any memory over here? Because we are not copying any data to store in your model. So we don't require any memory over here. Perfect. So simply no need of resources to store or processing the data. These are the advantages. Then what are the disadvantages? What are the disadvantages over here? The disadvantages are, so what are the advantages? Those are the disadvantages. Better performance because of the data is already copied into Power BI model. So definitely performance is less because every time the visual bringing the data from the data source. What is the second advantage? This mode will support to connect all data sources, but only few data sources supporting direct query mode. What is the third advantage? All features in Power BI desktop are enabled. Okay, all features in the Power BI desktop enabled and can use for the development. All the features in Power BI desktop are enabled. But here few, but some of the data sources are not sorry, some of the features, development features are not supporting. Done. So what is a live connection? Live connection and direct query mode both are same functionality, but the only differences is live connection will support only for live connection will support only for SSAS tabular and multi-dimensional data sources. Live connection will support only for SSAS tabular live connection will support only for SSAS tabular and multi-dimensional data sources. This is also will give you always live data. SSAS tabular model, tabular and multi-dimensional, comma, Power BI data sets is one of the data source. So when you are using these two data sources, simply if you are going here in your Power BI desktop, go to get data, see there is a Power BI data sets, there is the analysis services. If I am clicking on the Power BI analysis services, it will give you two options, import mode and live connection. See, connect live. If I am connecting to SQL Server, connecting to the SQL Server, it is supporting two connections, import mode and direct query. Okay, server and database. Direct query mode and import mode. But for analysis services, we have to use the direct query mode. Live connection will come instead of direct query. Then you can get a question over here, why they don't use direct query mode only instead of live connection. Comparing to direct query mode, in the direct query mode when you are using, some of the development features you are missing. When you are using live connection, you will completely losing the data discovery part. We are performing a data discovery, right? Data discovery means connecting to the data source and performing the ETL and modeling. When you are using a live connection, these two you have to perform in your data source development. There is no option to perform any kind of things in your here. Okay. So how to choose which connectivity mode is fit for your project? How to choose which connectivity mode is fit for your project. So when you are going to choose a import mode or direct query mode or live connection, that is based on the kind of the data source, and the second one is volume of the data, kind of data source and volume of the data, and whether data in the source system changed frequently or not. Okay, kind of data source, volume of the data, whether data in source changed frequently or not. For example, my kind of data is a SSAS. Simply you can go blindly live connection. SSAS, prefer the live connection. Or if it is a SQL Server, then you need to again consider input mode or direct query mode. Volume of the data is less volume, prefer the input mode. Prefer import. Huge volume of the data, prefer direct query mode. The volume of the data is less and the data in the source changed frequently or not. Yes, it's changed. It is not changing frequently. It is not changing frequently. Then use input. Daily only one time the data will be changed in my source system. Then you can prefer the input connectivity mode. So first thing what you need to see is kind of data source, SQL or SSAS tabular model. If it is a tabular model, then you no need to look on these two options. Blindly go to the live connection. If it is SSAS, if it is apart from the SSAS anything, just think about, okay, if it is SQL Server or Oracle or whatever, then what is the size of your data? Less size means it's in a GBs, 2 to 1 to 5 GB or 10 GB, go ahead with this one. Input mode. If it is more than 10 GB or 20 GB or terabytes of the data, then go ahead with the direct query mode. Use volume of the data. Use volume of the data. Use direct query mode. Data is not changing. Data is changing frequently. Use direct query. Any questions so far?
Ram, so like you said, if we use a direct query, some features are not supported, right? So how do we implement those features?
So that, come again your question. SQL
Like
Server
direct,
will support the
direct
direct
query.
query.
No, no. Like if you use direct query, you said some of the development features are not supported.
Yeah,
So like how do we do that? Like if those are not development features are not supported, is there any other alternative way?
you have to do in your source system. Data
Oh,
should be cleaned in your source level.
okay. So what kind of development features are not supported in that?
Yeah, these two kind of whatever the data discovery, whatever the data modeling, you cannot perform.
Oh, okay, got it.
Only visualizing the data.
Oh, so we need to do that Power Pivot and Power Query in SSIS and SSES then. Is that correct? If we are
You will
using
get these features. You will get these features in the direct query mode, but very limited features.
oh,
If you are using live connection, nothing will be here. Only data visualization.
no, okay, yeah.
You cannot perform any data discovery part. I mean Power Query, or you cannot perform any modeling over here when it is a live connection.